way, and my eyes were just filled with tears. Even now, I just get emotional just thinking about. And I went to my team, and they said, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I said, the woman, she's going to kill herself. She's going to kill her daughter. We got to do it. I don't know what to do. I'll never see her again. And I literally couldn't walk from the ferry station. I got to the top with assistance from my team. A car came around. A woman jumped out of the car. She ran up to me in an awkward way, you know, when strange women embrace men, and she throws her arms around me, and she whispers into my ear, "Something you prayed changed my life. I now have a new plan." It was the woman from the ferry boat. And God was that way. And I can testify, as a witness of 21 years of helping people in crisis, that God is present in our time of need.
Thank you, Ray. We'll be right back.
Next, this journalist's search for God's grace after the massacre at Virginia Tech. Don't go away.
Welcome back. I'd like to introduce Beth Leaders, an award-winning journalist who's covered stories in nearly 20 countries. The terrible shootings at Virginia Tech moved her in a very special way. She's written a book about it, Lifting Our Eyes, Finding God's Grace Through the Virginia Tech Tragedy. Beth, welcome to Lifestyle Magazine.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Beth, we wanted to find out what put you at Virginia Tech during the time that this happened.
Right. Well, I was watching television like almost the rest of the world when the first events were unfolding from Virginia Tech. And you kept hearing all the negative things and it was very just a horrendous situation. And after a while, I got to hearing kind of this voice of feeling, there's more to this story. There's more to this story. And I felt God just impressing on me that He had a story to be told. And I'm like, yeah, you go, God, tell your story. And then I kind of felt, and I'm like, no, not me. I don't want to be a part of this. No, I got too much going on. And yet it just kept coming to me. So I just took off on my own, went out. I saw some friends in Northern Virginia and drove down, and this was just a few days after it happened, and just showed up.
What was it like on campus once you got there?
Right. And by the time I got there, a lot of the media had already, had calmed down a little bit, because at first it was just so much, and people were saying we felt we were injured twice. First by all the loss of our friends here, and then having all the world come in and just have their microphones in our face. And so I never went in as a journalist. I just went in as a friend just to listen. And I didn't know anybody when I showed up on campus that night. I checked into a hotel, and I just made a phone call to somebody, and it was a gal that worked with international students there. And she invited me to the next day on campus and just took me around. And so I went to all the places where Cho, had been in the dorms, and just started hearing stories of people. And
where the shootings had occurred.
Right, where the shootings occurred, and went, stood outside the hall, Norris Hall, where most of the people lost their lives. And to that first trip, I'd been in 1 year's time 4 times there. And I ended up writing the book, Lifting Our Eyes, Finding God's Grace Through the Virginia Tech Tragedy. And there's so many stories, incredible stories of people, of just of courage, of survival in the midst of that. We've got...
Share one with us, please.
Sure, absolutely. I was just going to say, one of the first people that I met was a teaching assistant named Haiyan Chen. She's originally from China, and she was in Norris Hall that day on the 2nd floor. She and her classroom were the only classroom that kept Cho out. He tried to get in several times, got she saw him down the hallway just a few feet, ran back in, closed the door quick, and told her students, quick, there's a shooter out there. Because a lot of the people thought it was construction noise at first. They're just sitting in a classroom taking notes. And so they were able to push a desk up against the door, and then she hid behind the podium for the teacher there, and Cho shot in twice, just missed her. So that's one of the stories, and I think one of the ones that really touched my heart is one of the students. She was a freshman at the time. Her name's Molly McDonald, 18-year-old, and she was on a lot of the national news right away because she had heard the first gunshots in the dorm right next to her friend Emily, and the resident assistant, Ryan Clark, were killed right next door. So she heard actually Cho run past her dorm room, opened the door, saw the bloody footprints. And she ended up talking to me several weeks later, just on a long telephone conversation. I met her, but she wasn't ready to talk. And, again, I didn't come in to just say, tell me your story. but really to just listen. And it was just an incredible story for her to just tell the terror of seeing it could have been me. Usually I don't lock my dorm room, and that night I happened to. And and she's a really strong Christian, and actually in Bible study with Lauren McCain, who's the one student that we kind of, in the book, we walk through her life. Lauren is also one of the students who were killed. So Molly and Lauren knew each other. And so, yeah, there's these incredible stories of people, either firsthand witnesses. We have another gentleman, I remember sitting there with coffee with him a few weeks later, and he was just staring out at, into the space almost, because he was on the 3rd floor as an engineering professor, and down on the floor praying as he felt the vibrations of the shots going up through the floor, and just the trauma, of that. And so, again, the story, though, the book itself is to really paint the picture that, in the midst of that, as bad as it is, as horrific as it is to lose your loved ones, your friends, God is still there. God didn't close his eyes that day and walk away. He was there. And, there's bad things that happen. People make choices like Cho did. He made a wrong choice that day. And so, again, there's just so many good things that come from it, even though at first you don't see it right away.
But you think that you still found God's grace in the midst of all of that?
Absolutely. Even from the early days, you've got people pulling together, students that never even talked to their fellow, their suite mate before. You find people all of a sudden beginning to just cry with each other, listen more. The community, the churches, the businesses that brought in food and opened their homes to people. I've talked to several people that just said, we had people, some students say, I just need to get away, and they would open their homes. And it's in Virginia Tech and Blacksburg there, it's a smaller town. It's not that big. It's rolling hills, feels very agriculture. And so to have this kind of a mass murder like that happen for them. Absolutely.
A real shock to that community.
Absolutely.
I think I hear the same thing coming through with both of your stories so far, and that is in the aftermath of this horrible tragedy, the people coming together heroically, lovingly, supporting one another and helping people through the midst of the ugliness that existed there is really one of the places where God was at work, even in the midst of these tragedies. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because people have a basic desire to be connected. Even when I was at Virginia Tech, the people want to be connected. They want to touch out, reach out and touch flesh. And when the church responds and the people of God respond, we become Christ to them.
Christ hands right there. Thank you. I wish, there's so many more stories I know you've got, but we're going to have to move on, I'm afraid. We'll be right back.
Up next, God and Hurricane Katrina.
Thank you. We're back. We're joined now by Bruce Lee Smith, the founder of Optimus Life, a life coaching ministry. His experiences in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina compelled him to write Soulstorm, Finding God Amidst Disaster. And Bruce, welcome to Lifestyle Magazine.
We're glad you're here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
How did you get involved with Hurricane Katrina?
Well, I grew up in New Orleans. That's my hometown. So born and raised there, went away for 10 years, came back, and can't get away from it. They tell you if you live in New Orleans, you can try to get away, but you always wind up coming back.
I have heard many people say that.
So what was it like to be there during Katrina?
Well, it's hard to describe. As